Well, welcome everyone to Real Balance Global Wellness Services free monthly webinars. It's our pleasure to bring these webinars to you each and every month and make them free and available to everybody. You will find them archived at the Real Balance website at realbalance.com in the resources section. And if you're one of our students or alumni, you'll find all of the previous webinars archived there in the Coach Center. So Real Balance Global Wellness Services is one of the world leaders in health and wellness coach training. We've been doing it longer than anybody and are fully approved by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching and by the International Coach Federation, not just for continuing ed, but also for approved coach-specific training hours. So we have an amazing lineup today that I will get right into with you. We're just very honored to have some resources here today that can help all of us to take a look at how do we coach others and how do we help ourselves through this unprecedented time in history. The global pandemic of COVID-19 is unlike anything we've had to deal with before. And we're finding that coaching once again is an extremely effective and helpful way that people can get some of their needs met, some of their fears explored, some of their anxiety dealt with in a healthy way. So our special guests today include Doctors James and Janice Prochaska, who are extremely well known to you, I'm sure, for all of their work in working with the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change. And also Dr. Pat Williams, who is, I think, one of the real founders of the whole life coaching field, a pioneer in all of that work, who's still very active today contributing to the cause. So let me just let James and Janice kind of introduce each other a little bit further so that you get a better feel for some of what they bring to the table here today. I'll have Pat do that, and then we'll get right into a format where we're going to have about 1/3 of the session being about how you, the coach, can help others, about 1/3 about your own self-care during all of this, and then a full third devoted to your questions. Now, one thing I want to ask you to do is do not use your chat function for questions. Please use your Q&A question function only. You'll find that down at the bottom of your screen if you bring your cursor down there. And that way we can generate a report of those Q&A questions and really address that more fully and share that with you. So, James and Janice, would you like to introduce each other?
Yes, I'm Jim Prochaska. I'm a professor of clinical and health psychology at the University of Rhode Island and director of the Cancer Prevention Research Center. And I'm the proud parent of 2 and a proud grandparent of 5.
That's some important qualifications there.
And I'm Janice Prochaska. I have a PhD in social work from Boston College. For about 30 years, I worked in a family service agency in Newport, Rhode Island. And then I helped founded Pro-Change Behavior Systems with Jim and led that for about 20 years. And then we sold that company. It still exists, and it builds trans-theoretical model programs that are digital and can be used in a variety of situations, including with coaches. And then when we moved to California, I worked with Jim and we wrote Changing to Thrive, our latest book.
Yeah. Which if it isn't on your bookshelf, it needs to be. Absolutely. Yeah, Pat, go ahead and introduce yourself a little further.
Well, Pat Williams, I'm professionally, I was a psychologist here in Northern Colorado for 15 years, but I always functioned as a coach without even knowing that because I didn't like to buy the concept of pathology and brokenness, et cetera. And even if somebody was seriously damaged. So then I started coaching in 1990 in the corporate world with Hewlett-Packard, Kodak, Waterpik, et cetera. And let me just say up front, my computer sometimes lapses. So if I freeze for a moment, I will be back. Just hang in there for a few seconds. I heard about coaching in 95, went to the first conference in Houston and was a founding member of the International Coach Federation, and really saw that that was to become something not what I thought it would be today with 40,000 members in 144 countries. But founding member of that, I was recently honored to be in their first inaugural class as their circle of distinction. That's why the gray hair, you know, it means I've been around a while, written 7 books on coaching, and a new program on conscious living mastery that I'm proud of. So I continue to coach, although I like teaching better, and I'm giving back a lot of coaching and coaching with Navy SEALs and former prisoners and things like that.
Yeah, and Pat and I have been friends for over 20 years.
Oh yeah, I forgot that part.
And
Fishing buddies and brood tasting buddies, and yeah.
yeah, not that that's a qualification, but just to share a little bit about myself, I'm also a psychologist. I did about, oh golly, it depends on how you count it, but maybe 27 years of clinical work. But really got into coaching like Pat, not quite as early as him, but quite early on. And really, it fits so well with my whole humanistic psychology kind of approach as well. And I've been involved in the wellness field since the get-go. I got to attend the very first wellness conference ever back in '77. And I saw the fit between the two right from the start, and was one of the developers of the whole field of health and wellness coaching, and also one of the founding board members of the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. And at this point, my company and I have trained over 9,000 health and wellness coaches all around the world. So enough about us. How can we help you, the coach, to work with clients who are showing up in all sorts of different ways? I've been getting input from coaches that are saying 2 different things. I'm working with people that are fearful, that are anxious, that are having difficulty with their sleep, difficulty with their interpersonal relationships with others during this whole time of isolation and, you know, quarantine or whatever you want to call it. And I'm also hearing coaches talk about clients that are finding this opportunity to no longer have the time barrier there, and now they can actually focus on their health and wellness. They're taking time to learn how to cook, or, you know, or to use their cooking skills for really healthy meals for a change. They're doing all kinds of things, making gardens, all sorts of stuff. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We're also hearing coaches that are very afraid of the economic impact of all of this. We've got coaches that are getting furloughed, laid off from big companies, even though, like we had one of the companies that we've trained a lot of people tell us yesterday that they had more demand than ever from their clients, but yet economically they were tight and they were actually furloughing some of their coaches. So we've got kind of everything happening at once here. So drawing upon some of the wisdom that you all have, and I would think, you know, we can talk about how someone's readiness to engage in behavior change is affected by all this stress and turmoil. And we can also talk about some ideas and guidelines for what you can do with clients. Pat, you had a list that Janice was referring to earlier. Would you like to just kind of share some of those items, and maybe that'll kick us off here?
Yeah, I created a list. I don't know the original source, but I amended what I found online a little bit, and I call them the daily quarantine questions. And one of them is, what am I grateful for today? Number 2 is, who am I checking in on or connecting with? We've all found out a surprisingly amount of the fact, let's see, I saw Trevor Noah 2 weeks ago do his show from home. He picked up his iPhone and said, you know, this thing actually makes calls. because most people just get texts or Facebook or watch Netflix or something. And I've been calling people that I went to high school with, that I see on Facebook, just call them. And I think that's something we can recommend to our clients. What expectations of normal am I letting go of today? Number 3, we don't know what the new normal is going to be, but it's not going to be what it was, you know. And in William Bridges' book on transitions, it's like what was, what will be, we're stuck in the what is, and we don't know what will be. It will be different, and a lot of it will be better. I mean, I really think a lot of people are learning they can work from home, that they can do more things with family, that they can appreciate nature more, and all those sorts of things. And then the last 3 are, how am I getting outside today? Speaking of nature, thank God we're not in a nuclear holocaust where you can't go anywhere. We can get outside. And how am I moving my body today, which comes with getting outside. And then lastly, what beauty am I either creating, cultivating, or inviting in today? I have the pleasure of looking down the river right through my backyard and the trail that I walk with my dog. And so I encourage everybody to think creatively about those 6 quarantine questions and put them into action.
And I was going to share that I've been taking those last 2 questions. How am I moving my body today? And what beauty am I either creating or cultivating or inviting today? And use those 2 as a way of centering a small group that I was meeting with, for example, last night. And it was a great way of checking in with everyone, a great way of teaching everyone that it's important to do those 2 things, and then learning from each other as how different people were applying those 2 things, moving their body and creating some beauty or inviting some beauty in.
Yeah, you know, I think it's so important that we distinguish between social distancing and social isolation.
Bingo, yes.
You know, we need connectedness more than ever.
Right.
And like Pat was saying, instead of that, you know, business as usual, quick little text kind of thing, you know, call up and talk to somebody. You know, I got an email from a cousin of mine who just turned 80. And I thought, you know, I started actually writing an email back to her, and I thought, you know, I'm just going to call her. And, you know, it was fantastic and so much richer and deeper of a connection. And I think doing this in a conscious way, encouraging our clients to think consciously about connection.
Yeah.
And not make assumptions that it even has to be the way it was, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I think one reality, though, I mean, we're going to speak to this, but yes, we know there's fear. We know there's loss. We know there's grief. We know there's anxiety. And so feel those things and acknowledge those things. And once you do, you know, I always say emotion is energy in motion. Once it gets expressed, it'll shift. And that's even proven out neurologically today in neuroscience. So don't deny the scary stuff or the unwelcome stuff. And then you'll be able to shift to the positivity that is available today as well.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to what I see as the most common concern that both our clients and ourselves have, and that's distress. And distress can be anxiety, depression, stress. And one of the most common ways that people cope with distress. And IMH did a study of 75,000 people, and they found when distressed, they smoke more cigarettes, drink more alcohol, eat more junk food, and flop on the couch. Okay? And those are what we call the big 4. Those are the ones that are most important in terms of with chronic disease. But later I'll comment in terms of how important they can be for acute infections and our fears about that. And I think in terms of with health coaches, being able to help folks with those ways of coping and to recognize that at this time with so much distress, you know, you're going to have your clients or yourself likely to relapse. Okay? Because they, you know, that's how they relied on when they've been distressed. And what's important is from our model, we studied when people relapse, how many go back to pre-contemplation? Fact is very few. They go back to contemplating or preparing. And so they'll be more ready once the threats are gone to go back to taking action, back to a healthier life.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something that coaches need to really reassure their clients with. I liked how you said it when we were talking about this, Jim. You talked about lapse and relapse. Would you clarify that a little more for us?
Yes, lapse is temporary. It's a time to get us through the tough times like we have right now. But relapse would be, too often would be those who start to give up on themselves and their ability to be able to change, their ability to cope. And one of the messages that I like to send is, we're not going to give up on you. Okay? We're going to help you to get through that lapse and then to come back stronger, more ready to get back to a healthier lifestyle.
So once again, the coaching relationship, which, you know, same as with psychotherapy, every single study always says that's the most curative factor.
Right.
You know, that is as important as ever. And here the coach can perhaps help that person reframe things a bit so that they view it as a lapse, not as evidence that, oh, you know, I can't do this, and their self-efficacy takes a dive. That's probably a very important thing to get across to people.
Just to say, the biggest predictor of a good relationship between coach and clients, the biggest predictor is stage of change. And those in pre-contemplation are the ones that coaches have the most problems with, who can end up feeling demoralized about.
Right.
And I think it's really important that we be able to empathize with somebody who is in pre-contemplation, and that we can still be of help with them.
You know, I really appreciate you bringing out that point. It ties back into what Pat was talking about. Deal with the emotion first. You know, I like to say FAVE, first acknowledge, validate, and empathize. Do that first, and then you can get into the what am I going to do about it?
Right.
I think a lot of coaches that maybe aren't as experienced or aren't as well trained sometimes, you know, jump to solution.
Right.
And they try to find out, okay, boy, I want to help this person feel better fast. If they can just, you know, do something differently, well, let's get there. But on the way, like Pat was saying, if we don't attend to the emotional components here, we don't get some of that dramatic relief that you talk about, Jim, in your books. You know, do you kind of open the door for that person to consider different strategies? Do you open their thinking, which is often limited by the fear and anxiety that they're experiencing? Once you've, you know, not been afraid to validate their feelings, that they've got a right to feel the way they feel, to acknowledge what they're going through, to empathize, then the person, I think, opens up to more possibilities.
Yeah, emotions are harbingers of information. You know, they're and if we deny them, we miss the message. So it's like I can laugh now, but if I'm fearful or anxious or worried about something and I deny that, then I miss what could come. You know,
Yeah.
it's the one way to look at it is
Whoa, there's that freeze he was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he'll be back in just a moment. But yeah, you know, we're on to something very important here, and I want to get back to what you were saying, Jim, about the big four. You know, health and wellness coaches, I would say most of them, the majority of people they're working with, their clients already have health challenges, some kind. It may be just, you know, hypertension, or it might be, you know, one of the major chronic illnesses that people are facing. And I think it's especially important if you're saying under stress, people do more of these four factors that can really harm one's health. Just think of the damage that does to an immune system. You know, I remember when I was really into behavioral health and biofeedback, we used to have entire conferences on stress in the immune system because there was such a powerful effect, you know, and it's so important for coaches to be able to offer people something more than just, you know, solutions. what can they actually do to reduce the stress? How can they recover from the stress?
Well, I think that's extremely important. And I think one of the good news is that we want to share with our clients came out of Stanford recently, where they discovered how to assess the functional age of your immune system and compare that to the biological age. And so at age 60, you can have an immune system that's like a 40-year-old, or you can have one that's like an 80-year-old. And when people are feeling helpless, we say, what can you do to take and improve your immune system? And it's in terms of being able to make some of those kinds of changes, because what they found is the big four and stress are what compromise the immune system the most. And the good news is we can improve our immune system with making some changes really quite quickly.
Yeah, and again, that's really encouraging. You know, I think it's so important during this time when, you know, well, there's so much bad news, right? You know, people are looking for, our clients are looking for, you know, what can be done. And you know, it's, here we go again, this wellness lifestyle is so important.
Yes.
And quite frankly, it's often what helps you get through really severe health challenges.
Yes.
And unfortunately, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it really improves your immune system. That's what we really want to do now with COVID-19, is to improve our immune system as much as we can.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the media does not talk about, you know, the lifestyle factors, the behavioral factors, and how important those are, because those are things that can be more under our control versus things that, you know, you can't do anything about in terms of the fear about getting infected. Yes, that's real.
But if we want to really compound the fear, just think in a way where you feel hopeless and helpless. And that's, of course, a great formula for depression, as we know, on top of that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start transitioning now into what can the coach do for their own self-care. As you know, and have experienced yourselves and seen so many times in fellow coaches and clinicians, all of us folks in the human helping professions, we tend to take care of everybody else and then put us last on the list, if we get around to ourselves at all. And I'm sure there are a lot of coaches out there that are struggling with that. I know one of the things that we got some input from was from Diana Bishop from Kaiser Permanente, just talking about how busy, you know, their coaches have been, and how, you know, some of their clients are finding that it's a great time to focus on health and change, and then others, including the coaches, are stressed because their children are home from school and they're having to, you know, juggle all this stuff internally in the household. If they have been working remotely, they may be, you know, better equipped to deal with some of this. If they haven't been, it's a whole new stress. So let's get some ideas across of how people can, how coaches can take care of themselves during all this.
I wanted to add, before we go to some ideas,
Yes.
a tweet that John Norcross, who was one of Jim's students and is his colleague, he tweeted this week, and this is what John said: "Self-care is not a luxury. Self-care is a human requisite, a professional necessity, and an ethical imperative."
Wow.
Beautiful.
That is pretty powerful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a quote, Mike, that I read from Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun. And she says, "In trying to help others, we might come to realize that compassionate action involves working with ourselves as much as working with others." You know, we as coaches, whether you're in the health field, specifically wellness or just generative, we can't be present. We can't be a receptacle that we want to be if we're not smoothing out our rough edges. I mean, life happens to us too. Before the virus, there was still stuff that happened. And I like to say that these days, viruses may be contagious, but so is courage and positivity. We got to be careful with that term. I'm writing a blog on how we might want to quit using the term going viral for positive things. That phrase probably needs to go away as not very positive, but we can have people catch positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just to share, we did a large study, 4,000 people from 38 states, and we worked with coaches doing multiple behavior change, and we found that not only did they reduce or increase exercise, increase healthy eating, increase better stress management, but we also found that they increased positivity. That people were more positive, they were more optimistic, and what was really important was a majority started with either suffering or struggling. And that to me describes our population. And with the coaches spending just a limited amount of time on the telephone, they had the majority in that treatment group went from struggling or suffering to thriving. And that's where the name of our book came from, Changing to Thrive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, what is the silver lining, type of thing? If you're not familiar with the blue zones, that's a study that National Geographic and Council on Aging put together and hired Dan Buettner to be the spokesperson for, and he wrote the book on the blue zones and has done a great job of promoting it. And he posted something here online just saying that crisis often morphs into blessings with time. This lockdown and the accompanying boredom gives the fields of mind a chance to lay fallow so that when the seed of a new idea comes along, it can germinate and spring to life. Here's to reinventing ourselves in small and big ways.
Just to add to that, Blue Zones has an assessment that you can take online, and I took it, and I was so impressed. And it would give you feedback about your expected life span, and then it would give you feedback on the changes you could make to increase your lifespan by another 7 years. And it was just really, really helpful. And that also could be something that clients could take and see, here's things that I could do that could enhance my lifespan. And we also we want, like Blue Zones, to have our health span be equal to our lifespan, not just increasing the lifespan.
Yeah, in the wellness field for many years, we used to say, well, we do this wellness lifestyle not to live longer, but to have better quality of life. And as we did more and more research, we found, no, wait a minute, lifestyle and longevity are extremely related. I've heard Dan Buettner say that it may be as low as 20%, the genetic factor in longevity. It's really about culture. It's about all the social determinants of health that we talk about. And it's also about our own individual behavior.
I've had recently, I've been talking to a lot of International Coach Federation chapters and other groups on how coaching can adapt and be present for this COVID-19 thing. So what can coaches do? What does their life change? And there's two factors that I came up with talking about the beingness of the coach, because that's what the relationship is about, right? One is staying sharpened. I use that term, and there's 3 quotes that came to mind. Stephen Covey talked about in 7 Habits, the last one, to keep your saw sharpened, right? So we need to keep our rough edges sharpened and be ready and present. The second quote that came was Charles Dickens in Tale of Two Cities. It was the worst of times and is the best of times. It's true. Right now, that's true. And the third quote will relate to what you just spoke of, Michael. In Candide by Voltaire, the last statement made by Pangloss was, "And we all need to cultivate our gardens."
Yes. Yeah, I
Those
think
are
this
cool.
is a great time for that term.
Yep.
One of my spiritual teachers, John P. Milton, who
Mhm.
has done the sacred passage training for years with people, he would always talk about cultivating your energy, cultivating your awareness. Maybe this is a time when coaches can do some of that internal work
Yeah.
and interpersonal work that's involved in their own cultivation of spirit and presence. Because like you said right at the beginning there, Pat, that coaching presence, our way of being with people, is so huge in the way that we deliver the knowledge that we have, the theoretical basis that we have underneath our coaching.
Mhm.
And our way of being is so affected by our own anxiety, by our own fears, by our own concerns. And maybe this is a time for cultivation in many ways.
Well, it is. I mean, coaching is a unique conversation. It's not the kind of conversation you have at Starbucks when you used to be able to go there. It's or with the best, because a coach is somebody you don't live or work with or sleep with, so they're supposedly objective. And if you can connect empathically and heartfelt, that's why it's a unique conversation and trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. So to be able to do that, the self-care part is huge.
Yes.
It's back to the John Norcross tweet there, the quote there, and what
Yes.
he was getting across. Yeah.
I just want to represent for us older citizens. Janice and I belong to a Sunday morning circle, and average age is 75 years old.
Mm.
And we've adopted the theme that we are going to grow until we go.
I love that.
I'm taking that. I love it. I'm only 70. I'm a youngster. So
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I got to make a little poster out of that.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. 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 So in terms of coaching self-care, what else would help coaches to give themselves permission to do this? Because that's what I see so often in the way. What gets in the way of you giving yourself permission to take care of yourself, to take the time to do these self-care activities? When you do self-care activities, do you end up feeling guilty? What can help with that?
This is a time when coaches need to emphasize what should always be available, and that's a self-reflective practice. When you look at your practice, and you have a peer, or you have a mentor, or you have your own coach, because that's where you get to be honest on how you're taking care of yourself, how you're being available, how you're being drained or not. Because if you're going to maintain or get new clients, you can't be empty.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. What do you do to replenish?
Yeah. I like to use laughter. I know that laughter is good for our immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So I can go online and I'll go back to when I was a kid and have the Three Stooges, and just laughing galore with them, or
Yep.
Charlie Chaplin,
Yep.
and before you go to bed, in terms of laughing and having those kind of good feelings at that time.
I agree. I belong to the Robin Williams fan club, so I get
Oh,
video.
nice.
I get
Yeah,
video on Facebook every day, and I just have tears in my eyes. It's just,
Yeah. So really, that's kind of a cultivation too.
It is.
Cultivating our own sense of humor, keeping it alive. And it's not BSing yourself. It's not self-deception to engage in that during a time of crisis.
Yeah.
This is not an acute crisis. This is one of those nasty, long drawn out crises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our response can't just be an acute response. It has to be a sustainable response.
Right.
Yeah. There was a question that came on, but my area where I feel the most distressed is about the financial well-being of so many people.
Yeah.
We've got two disasters, not just a health disaster, but a financial disaster. And my biggest distress is we need to be moving and taking some more risks in order to be able to help those who are hurting the most financially. And that's going to be a lot more people than just a health disaster.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I think coaches are going to have to get very creative in how they offer their services to make them affordable to people. I think we're going to probably see the rise of a lot more group coaching.
Yes, that's a good idea.
You know, which also meets people's needs for connectedness as well, as well as being affordable. I think there's probably some real challenge for creative opportunity here. You know, what could that look like? And perhaps brainstorming with other coaches about what that could look like, instead of just sitting there beating your head against the wall thinking, what can I think of all by myself? Yeah.
I actually think this crisis is bringing a great opportunity for coaching. After some adjustment, a lot of clients who can still afford it or who have some way to pay for coaching or get their coaching during this major part of the crisis is, if you used to see people face to face, well, nowadays a lot of companies are realizing, hey, maybe I don't need this big building. Half my workers can work from home. You know, so there's creative ways to do it, and talking with other coaches, other people in private coaching can help with that. We're all going to reinvent ourselves a lot of ways.
Just along those lines, the number one predictor of poor well-being is how long is your, does it take you to get to work? And in so many cities, it's 1 hour going and 1 hour coming back, 2 hours a day. You multiply that, and how many years of life are lost?
Wow.
And I think the more we can work from home, if we can enhance well-being that way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a powerful statement. Yeah. Yeah, you know, there's an old song, it's the end of the world as we know it.
That's a good reference, yeah.
And I think what's going to help us get through all this is the conscious effort to really decide what we're going to include in our lives.
Yeah.
When all of this starts to finally subside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always define wellness as living our lives consciously in ways that enhance our health and well-being. It's about that mindfulness, that conscious living.
Right.
And I think the mindfulness practices that coaches are starting to embrace and share with their clients, you need to be practicing those on your own as well, you know. And, you know, part of it is maybe a relaxation or a meditation part, but part of it is just a day-to-day awareness part. You know, it's interesting. I've seen some articles about how people are saying, oh, there's more wildlife now. And some of the wildlife officials are saying, you're just seeing them now.
Yeah.
You know, you haven't been home at 11 o'clock to know that deer walk through your backyard then. That kind of thing.
Or the mountain lions can now say, hey, there's no people here. I can come further into town.
Yeah, like they did in Boulder the other day on the video. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, what are we going to include? You know, I think part of our way forward here is a conscious thinking about, okay, so how am I living my life? And I've got, you know, new definitions about time and boundaries, and how can I choose to do this differently? Or what do I have to cope with temporarily just to get by? You know, maybe I have to take a job after all this that I'm not real thrilled with, but can I view it as a way forward toward what I really want?
Right. Yeah, you know, Janice and James both mentioned earlier, when James, you mentioned the big four of eating, drinking, flopping on the couch, and smoking. And the other is there's so much research today now that shows what works. Mindfulness, when I learned it as meditation, was like this Eastern thing that had lots of promises, but there was no research to back it up. Well, then there was, and then there's more. And now today we know that the heart even has neurites in it, you know, that there's some sort of brain in the heart that connects with the mind. So there are things that actually do help, and wellness coaches are in the catbird seat of keeping that knowledge abreast.
Oh, I agree fully. A mindful breathing, for example, I can use that when I'm feeling anxious and all, and mindful drinking, so I don't drink too much. Mindful eating, what I most like is moving meditation. You know, where I flow through the woods and stroll along the path and have that moving while I am really connecting, you know, with nature as well.
Yeah, if you really want to learn how to listen, go on a hike, but don't talk.
Oh, I like that.
So let's shift over to the question and answer part here. I really want to encourage everybody to come forward with some questions. And again, use the Q&A, not the chat function. We can capture the Q&A and create a wonderful report for you. We can't really do it very well with the chat function. So we've got a few in here already. Let me go ahead and address a couple of these and throw them out there. Let's see. Here's one maybe directly there for James and Janice. Can you please comment on some of the big mistakes coaches make in helping clients move from action to maintenance? And how might that fit into what we're talking about too, I guess?
Well, first, I think we need to recognize that in a stage model, change is not linear, okay? So we can have lapses or slips, and we really want to make sure that we understand, we define that as a learning experience. What did I do right? What mistakes did I make? So I can move towards maintenance. Also, I think folks often define action as just 30 days, and then you have a whole new habit, a whole new behavior, and that's just not the case. You know, we're talking to having to change our brain, not just our behavior. And these neural pathways are so strong that when we get temptations or tough times like now, you know, those tend to get triggered. And so we need to say that this is going to take time. You know, Tiger Woods, best golfer of all times, when he changed his swing, he did it, you know, 1,000 swings a day for a whole year before he went back on, in order to, you know, recycle the brain and have it so that it's in your favor and much more positive. So action is a vulnerable time.
Yeah, I think that a mistake that a coach could make is that, yay, I got them to action. I'm all set. I accomplished it. You know, they can now go and run and be on their own. And the reality is that it's a stage where there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done by the participant. So to have helping relationships from the coach and from others, to use stimulus control to keep away from things that were drawing them back to the bad behavior.
Right.
And to make sure that there's some rewards and some counter conditioning. And Changing to Thrive gives help to coaches on what they could be doing depending on what stage the person is in.
Right.
At age 77, I had to remove ice cream from the house. Okay. You know, it was like an alcoholic, you know, it would call my name to come at night.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's something that I've always seen in that stage you're talking about is once the person's into action, now they get the reaction from the rest of the world around them. And some of that is supportive and some of it is the exact opposite, pushback.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's where coaches can really be valuable.
Yeah.
Let's see, we had a really good one here. Yeah, this one attendee is saying, I noticed that the essential workers that I have as clients seem to be in some denial since their jobs have not changed drastically. I'm concerned they may burn out.
Burnout is a major, major issue in our healthcare system. I did a thing at Harvard, and they presented a survey that they did about doctors burning out. And they asked, and this was like 500 doctors from 60 countries, how many would have your son or your daughter become a doctor? And the vast majority said no, it's burnout. And we work with a group that have the federally funded communities, clinics, and they spend most of their time trying to help their health professionals to keep from burning out. And so I think coaches with health professionals to help them to not burn out, is really, really important, even more these days than ever.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's already been some studies before the viral thing that said 60% of healthcare workers were already burned out.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the way, already there. And just because of all the stress, the collision between the business model and the medical care model, all those types of things. And now we throw gasoline on that fire with the, viral epidemic, pandemic, and wow, what a setup. So maybe what the coach is trying to get at here is, how do I help them recognize and honor the stress they're under? Some people's way of coping with those conditions is just put your head down and work harder.
Well, frankly, I think sometimes denial can be functional. Denial can be helpful. When you have people in the middle of a battle, you got to deny, and you've got to, act as if you're immortal. And we do need to and are recognizing them as heroes.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe coaches can actually honor and acknowledge people doing that. But I think at some point, because this is such a long drawn out thing, maybe that replenishment, that recovery, how can you consciously do that and still go back out to work again tomorrow?
Mm. Well, the good news is there are places that look like they are leveling off, and I think that's really good feedback. I mean, in terms of, hey, it has been worth all that we've had to do with all the stress, with all the risk. And I think getting that kind of, basic feedback that it looks like increasing numbers of places have peaked. Now the trouble is you have some models that say, we'll be going into 2022 before we can go back to normality. But I have to say, too many of the models have too little data, and they have been really misleading in terms of just how bad things are. They're bad, but they're not nearly as bad as what a lot of models have predicted.
Let me get to this question here. We've got Kristen saying, I work college students. They are dealing with much unknown about graduation, internships, next semester, spinning their wheels and having a hard time feeling motivated. What should I be saying to help them keep moving forward? Dealing with a lot of mourning type emotions, flip-flopping between anger and depression. Wow.
So the operational answer that I would come up with is not what you should be saying, but what should you be asking? It's like, what do you need? What are you missing? What would be helpful? What have you not thought of? I mean, there's some tips that we can give people, but there's always anxiety about the what we used to call or still do the VUCA environment of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now it's times 10.
Yeah, that's true.
So I would just connect to them and ask questions that are supportive and evocative for them to think what they've not thought.
I really appreciate you saying that, because what I'm kind of hearing in that question she's asking is a tendency that I think every human helper has when things really get intense to just tell people.
Yeah.
Like the quickest way I can help the most is to just provide information and tell people.
Right.
And I think this is where we have to realize, hey, you know what, that a little bit of that might help, a little bit of education may help if people really aren't clear or don't know. But mostly what people are coming to us with is things that they have to find their own way out of. And that's where we have to coach, not consult.
At our university, we made a video for students that, like would have a picture or a photo and say things like, you can make this a better world than it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
We are thinking about you, and we are caring about you. Because one of the things is with that isolation, they don't feel the caring and concern is directly. So various ways of communicating, but also recognize college years have always been a high distress time. We tend to think of golden time, but
Well, I did 17 years of work as a psychologist in university counseling centers, and I can really attest to that. Yeah, for sure. By the way, I do want to mention in the Q&A, if everybody hasn't found it, someone actually posted the 6 daily questions to ask yourself while social distancing. And
also with the help of somebody on there, I Googled it while we were on here. I found the reference, so I put that in the Q&A too. It's written by Brooke Anderson, and it was in Mind and Body magazine, March 24th. So whoever posted it on Facebook that I saw didn't reference her, and now I want to give her credit for that. So.
Yeah, very good, very good. Okay, here's one from Tamara saying, we usually suggest clients working on one change at a time. Any suggestions for helping them make lifestyle changes in a time when they may have many other changes already forced on them, working from home, kids at home, etc.?
Well, the good news is we've done multiple behavior change, and we found in terms of simultaneously working on multiple behaviors, let's, for example, use smoking. Those who are just have one behavior, they don't do any better than those who have 2 behaviors that they're working on, and they don't do any better than 3 people. 3 behaviors that they're working on. The problem is the action model assumes we're going to be having people take all kinds of action at once. But when you use a stage model, if they're prepared to take action on one, that would be a lot. So it really, in terms of our own mental model, can end up with us putting more pressure on people rather than helping them to make simultaneous changes. But which one are you ready to take action on? Which one do you need to be thinking about more?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And it fits right in with the way that we teach people to construct a wellness plan and to have multiple areas of focus, but not too many. But maybe up to 3, maybe even 4 if one of them is very easy.
Yeah.
But what we can do then is if we're implementing a stage model within that, area of focus number 1 may be action. Area of focus number 2, for that behavior, it may be more preparation. And we may have to still be really working, in complete pre-contemplation on another one to help someone move up through it. And you can definitely have more balls in the air than just one at a time. I think if we oversimplistically coach, if we dumb it down to just, I'm just going to work on this, you're going to walk 5 times this week, and that's all we're working on.
Yeah, and another tip is use your calendar as your friend. I mean, we have a lot of things in our calendar, but you can put in my time or white time and write in what you're wanting to be working on in your calendar, and then something else doesn't take over.
Yeah, conscious calendarizing.
Conscious calendar, yes.
Yeah. And that's where the self-care can fit in.
Yes, absolutely.
If you don't mark out that hour in the middle of the day to go for that walk, it's not going to happen.
Right.
As often anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And even, that maybe we get into some rituals where we have that 4 o'clock time where we call somebody and reconnect, put that on the calendar. Yeah.
I would also add that, let's say spouses, what we've seen is that they can be in very different stages about making a particular change. And they'll make causal attributions like, oh, he's so stubborn, you know, you can't get him to budge. Or he'll say, she's so controlling. And then we say, let's understand you're in different stages on this, okay? And maybe we can find some common ground rather than to take and make attributions that you can't change, like causal attributions.
You know, I think that's probably really helpful for people to know when they're stuck in the same household, you know? and one person is like, oh, let's go out and go for a walk, you know? The other person isn't there yet. You know, to have that understanding of one another. And that's probably a very important reminder for coaches as well as for their clients. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people experiencing now in their relationships, like when somebody retires after 50 years. I didn't know you were going to be home all the time. I was like, this is scary.
Hey, well, here's a really good little question from our professor friend at Loma Linda University, Ernie Medina. This is a personal question. What are the top 3 self-care practices of each panelist? Each of you.
Great
Your
question.
top 3, what do you do to take care of yourself?
Well, I get out in nature. I get out in nature every day, no matter the weather. I mean, nature is my church, if I dare say. Music, maybe while I'm walking, because I don't do sitting meditation well, so it's active, and laughter, like James mentioned earlier. I guess those 3 cover it: nature, music, and laughter.
That's a pretty good combination.
Yeah.
James, you were just about to say something too.
Oh, actually, along those lines, to me, heaven is being connected with nature and being connected with culture. But I have to say, ever since I was a free-range kid, I've treasured playing, and I love to play. And right now, the playing is going for beautiful walks. But boy, do I miss tennis.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, it's taking an outdoor shower among our redwoods in our backyard.
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
And reading a novel that's really well written that makes me think more about life and teaches me something at the same time about history or another person's life. And the third one, I'm talking about now more than ideally, of course, to play tennis, but I can't do that. But to get outside and just take a nice walk and just to be outside, that's important to me.
Yeah, I think we all 3 ought to go for a hike together.
We could do a virtual hike.
Yeah.
I'll videotape mine and send it to you.
There you go.
Down that path that you can see from your window.
Right.
Yeah, because I certainly share, you know, your passions there. I was very much a free range kid also, where the backyard stopped, the woods began for miles. And so I've always felt, you know, more at home there than in any city anywhere. So the more I have contact with that, the better.
And for those of you who do live in a big city, find a way to at least view nature or get in whatever nature is nearby where you can keep your social distancing, physical distancing.
Yeah, I mean, making use of parks and so forth.
Yep.
It's a great strategy. I also have been practicing Tai Chi for over 30 years. And that's a real centering, grounding type of process. I've just recently discovered a really great little online video of a young man from China sharing very enthusiastically 5 Qigong breathing exercises to build immunity and to expand your lungs and so forth. I think having strong lungs right now is a pretty important thing.
Yeah.
You know, Janice, I really also would say I always keep a novel going. You know, there's all this tendency to, you know, read all this professional stuff, and there's a mountain of that all the time, of course. But to just go ahead and read a novel, whether it's historical fiction or spycraft or whatever it is, you know, it's just fun getaway like that. And I think it helps you with your creativity and your metaphorical thinking and coaching.
Yeah.
I think I work with metaphor better because I've read so much. And great authors are, you know, replete with metaphors.
But Janice decided she was not retiring, she was repurposing. And she has repurposed with a vengeance. I mean, she belongs to like 7 book clubs. And
Oh, wow.
I love it because she teaches me about what the book's about. She's on boards for the UU Church and the library. It's just amazing. And to me, that's like giving back to the community.
Yeah. You know, I think that's probably something all of us are going to be thinking about during this time is repurposing, you know, our work and how we do it and why we do it, you know.
You know, Michael, I know we're almost out of time. There's a poem I found online that I think would be a good way to wrap this up, at least from my perspective, if you don't mind. And it's written by a woman named Kitty O'Mara, so I give her credit. It's called A Poem for Now. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. Pat, if you could just type the reference for that into the Q&A.
I will.
We're going to capture the Q&A for people and share it with participants. We've had a little over 100 people who are here live with us. We've had over 400 and some that registered, and they'll be viewing this on their own time, you know, later on as they get the recording and so forth. Now, what I do want to share is we've been talking a lot about helping people with fear and anxiety. And I decided to make this the topic of our next free monthly webinar in May. I'm going to be talking about how do you coach this in a non-clinical kind of way. So you as a coach, you know, can do this and be helpful. We're going to be doing that as usual on one of the Fridays here, same time, noon Eastern time. Sign up for our newsletter and you'll always stay informed about that and other things that are happening. I also want to let you know we are within a month, I do believe, of publishing, finally, my new book on masterful health and wellness coaching, Deepening Your Craft. And Whole Person Associates hopefully will be getting that out within about a month. So check us out at realbalance.com. Take a look at Pat Williams. What's your website, Pat?
drpatwilliams.com, drpatwilliams.com.
And Jim and Janice?
It's jprochaska.com.
Okay, that's easy enough to remember. And feel free to give us a call, email us. We're always helping people with their career choices and how to develop more competency and proficiency and mastery in health and wellness coaching. So if you're on your path to becoming a National Board Certified Coach or ICF certified or anything like that, we can help you get there. Thank you very much once again. I just really am so grateful to the three of you for helping all the coaches out there to do a better job and to take better care of themselves. So,
thank you for asking us.
Oh, it's been our pleasure.
So good to be with you.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye now, everybody.
I know.